All right, let's start. Good afternoon. My name is Umi Hankins, and I am the Senior Advisor to Eugenia, the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. And today we are fortunate and blessed and honored to welcome Molly Devereaux to be our speaker for the conversation that we're going to have. And this community conversation is centered on centering the experiences of Black survivors and exploring the intersections of survival sex and sex trafficking. This is a very relevant topic, not only for yesterday, the day before, the year before, and the decades before, but for us today as we're in the midst of looking at the realities of what's happening in our Black community. And I think as we begin to focus on what's going across not only our states and the country as a whole, but also internationally, it becomes very relevant that we look at the diversity of the Black community. And so we want to honor that. Today, we want you to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. There's a lot going on in our communities. Whether we leave our homes or not, then we still have a high exposure to what's happening in our community. So we want you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And most of all, the people who are joining our webinars and who participate with us tend to be advocates or service providers, and we love that. There may also be just individuals who identify with the community, whether it's the Black community or the diversity of the trans community and across the nation. So we want you to know that in order for you to be there for your families and for your communities, you have to be there for yourself. And so first of all, we say, you're looking at self-care. How are you incorporating self-care into your daily plan? And Molly and I, you may have heard, just had a rooftop having our water bottle sitting next to us because water is an important substance and part of our self-care. But there are many different dynamics to that. And one of those things is to know in your heart that we are good, wonderful people, that we all should be valued, that we all are inspirations to the world, and that in order for us to do that work that we've dedicated our lives and our hearts to, that we have to be at the center of self-care and in order to step out into the world and to be effective and to model what it is that we think other people should be doing for us. That self-care is very important. So, Molly, I heard Molly's bio was included on the information that you received with our distribution of the information that we're going to be talking about. So her bio, her complete bio is there. And please feel free to read that. But Molly is the Director of Operations of the Baltimore Safe Havens. And for more specific information, please go to the information that was sent to you earlier. But Molly, I'd also like to ask that you just take a moment as we begin this presentation. Could you lead us in just a moment of silence as we recognize all of the trans men and women who are in the Black community that have been impacted over the course of our history by the way in which Black lives have not completely mattered in our community. Could you just lead us in a moment of silence for that, Molly?
Yes, I can. If everyone can just reflect, if any of you all know of any trans individuals, whether a trans woman or a trans male, that has been killed or that you have lost recently, please let's just take a moment of silence. We take a moment of silence for Tony McDade. We take a moment of silence for Remy. We take a moment of silence for Johnny Parker Jones. We take a moment of silence for any trans individual, any trans woman or trans man of color that we have recently lost. In spirit, they are my brothers and sisters. We share the same backgrounds most times. And if we can all just, take a few seconds to reflect. Um, all right.
Thank you so much for that, Molly. And as we were going through that process, then I began to have names come up in my head of people in my community, acquaintances and friends and family members in my community that also have been suffered violence or or disenfranchisement, marginalization, and hatred over the course of their lifetime. So please feel free that if there are names that you'd like to post in the chat, that as we give recognition and honor to those individuals, then we also can say their name. We will know their name and can include it in what it is that we're doing here today and as we go forth and continue. Molly, I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint and then I will be able to process through the PowerPoint. And all you need to do is to let me know when you want me to change and turn to the next page. And basically, Molly and I are going to have a discussion. This is more of a conversation, but we did take the time to list the questions that we're going to engage with Molly on the PowerPoint. And so that's the information. So the question is there, but the information is coming from our star here, Molly. And so we want you to make sure you have your pens and your paper ready and that you are absolutely attentive to the unbelievable dynamic information that you're going to be receiving. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen and pulling that up. All right. And let's see. Are you share? Okay. All right, Ayana, I hope I did that right, Whitney. All right, it's on my screen, so I'm thinking that all is clear and we're fine with that. And so again, this conversation today is a conversation centering on the experiences of Black survivors and exploring the intersections of survival and survival sex and sex trafficking. So I'm gonna slideshow, play from the start as I'm sharing that. All right, I think we have it all together now. So Molly, as we go through our conversation, as I said, thank you for being our esteemed guest speaker for today.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to just start in with our conversations by posing these questions. And the first one that we want to do, Molly, is what is the first thing that you want people to understand about sex trafficking and the ways in which it shows up in the Black community?
First thing is sex trafficking is very prevalent in the Black community. Oftentimes, it starts in very urban areas. LGBT households are primarily a target because most oftentimes, you know, a person, especially if they're a person of trans experience, has been kicked out of their home due to not having parental acceptance, sometimes in how do I put it? I said the street community, um, it might show up, in the ways, sometimes there's drug addiction, and it goes about sometimes people have sold their children into sex trafficking. It starts where sometimes well, actually, let me give a little backstory. We have an instance where a young lady that I know was introduced into sex trafficking by a friend of hers. Um, Sex trafficking is, for people that don't know, is the act of taking a person and putting them into the sex trade, first off. Let me start there. Whether it is for personal gain, whether it is because you want them to be with you, you want to make them feel hip, you want to make them feel cool. Sex trafficking is never okay, and it shows up in many ways. Most oftentimes, you might find a trans individual, especially a trans woman of color, being sex trafficked by older trans women, because that's the only thing that they might know on how to make money. And when you have girls that are influenced by the older community, and they're looking for a way to go, sometimes they search for guidance. And unfortunately, one thing I've always stated is that you can only teach the next person as much as you know. And it tends to be a cycle that we are trying to break, us here in Baltimore. So we're trying to help break that cycle by showing them there is a different option. I know that before, a lot of trans individuals did not have the options, for employment or to reach higher education, but slowly but surely, more opportunities are opening up. And we're trying to show them, you can be a CNA. You don't have to go into the sex trade. Like, you can, you can go to school. You can get that master's degree. You can get that doctorate degree. I kind of get emotional with the sex trafficking situation, because, when I started my transition, and this is speaking from personal experience, I had a friend of mine. She was older. Even as a younger child, I always hung out with older people, and she was trans, and I was sex trafficked into sex trade. She acted as, I don't want to say my pimp, kind of sort of, but like, she would set me up with dates. And like, of course, she like would collect her fee because we were going from hotel to hotel. We were in different cities, what they call a tour. Um, and we went from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the West Coast to the Midwest, down south. And I felt as though I had to do it because I had no other options. While I was a high school graduate, I really didn't have any type of life experience. At that point, my employment skills were that of summer jobs. I never really had an actual job. So, sometimes you're placed in position where you feel like you have no other options but to go into the sex trade. The next question.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, I would also like to acknowledge and thank you for sharing your own personal story. That does mean a lot to us, and your openness with what you're struggling with. So at any moment that you need to take a break, and this is hard. And as we talk about self-care, we want you to be included in that aspect of self-care. Um,
Thank you.
Making sure that we're very conscious of that. So yes, and within those homes, I think we want to uplift what you're saying, that within the homes, that individuals are growing up with, and that really starts to frame how they think about themselves,
Yes.
how little they think about themselves, and lose value and hope. And then when they have an opportunity to identify with someone, then that person is only can only share what they know. So I think those are really dynamic points that you're making. Looking for things to change, but how can they change when options have been so little? But that home situation, starting there, is absolutely critical. And in that home situation, Molly, is it sometimes that that home situation is foster care or someplace else?
Um, Foster care is definitely a place that a lot of situations like that happen, especially if if they have what foster care describes as a runner, a person that is not comfortable being in any of the foster care homes, that has a habit of running a lot from whatever foster program that they were placed in. Um, People introduce them into the sex trade, and they will use them and utilize them to make money, and they'll go and they'll follow the path that I did. Um, and unfortunately, we hate to think of things like this, but all too often that's the case.
That's right. Mhm. Well, can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between sex work, survival sex, prostitution, and trafficking?
Yes. Um, so first off, survival sex work. Let me break that down to people. Um, Survival sex work is the act of engaging in sex work when you have absolutely no other options. Um, Oftentimes, you see a lot of trans individuals outside and that are participating in survival sex work because at the end of the day, they can't get a job. Um, they don't have an education. They don't have the necessary skills to take to grab hold of their life and flip it in a different direction. Um, One thing I always say, the system is stacked against trans individuals, especially trans women in particular, for the simple fact that almost every job that you go to, they do drug checks, they do background checks. At the end of the day, you're not going to give me a job if I have 20 something charges and I come and I do the drug test and I fail the drug test. But you don't know the reason why I have 20 something 20 something charges. The 20 something charges were charges of solicitation because I've been picked up because I was doing what I had to do to survive. I was doing what I had to do to feed myself, to house myself, to make sure that I could take care of my basic necessity needs, you know. And at times, drug use ties into survival sex work because at the end of the day, having to continuously abuse and use your body to take care of yourself, you know, people go through trauma when they engage in survival sex work. Survival sex work is some of the most dangerous work out there, especially when it comes to my community, for the simple fact that at the end of the day, you don't know if the date really wants to date you, whether they want to harm you, whether they want to kill you. And if I need, I'm not saying me in particularly, but if an individual they need to take a bump or they need to smoke a J or something to get them in the right mindset to do what they're getting ready to do, to make them not feel less than. I have some clients of ours that have like sat and like we've had support groups because I'm all about trying to heal the psyche. One thing I always try to do is I try to heal the psyche. I know once it's broken, it can never be completely healed, but you can try to do the best that you can. And some of the girls have expressed that sometimes they feel so dirty and they feel so bad about themselves, but the first thing they say is, What other options do I have? Wow, sex work. Sex work is just when people feel like they want to go out and they want to do things recreational. You can have a job and still go out and hang out in the corners and decide to get picked up, have sex, get paid for it. It's not out of a basic necessity need. It's just exactly what it is. It's sex work. Um, prostitution is prostitution and sex work is kind of hand in hand. Um, except for sex work, typically, while they could their job, they typically rely on sex. That's what their job is. Or prostitution is, okay, we're gonna go and we're gonna hang out in this corner and we're gonna see, what we can do, regardless of whether we have a job or not. I just feel like going out and, being flirty and fun. While um, trafficking gives, I was forced into this. I had no option. I was fed, a lot of times I was fed like, a whole bunch of hopes and dreams, a lot of fluff. And it's nothing like what I was told. I got hooked up with the wrong people, and now I'm regretting even entertaining them. Or in some cases, a person had been snatched and taken and forced into the sex trade. Next question.
Mm-hmm. And just relating those terms on prostitution, because I know that oftentimes as look at Black women and girls, that there's said that they are prostitutes, but as Black women, girls, trans men, and women, it says that they are prostitutes. But then other communities see as trafficking having more victimization type of impact to it. Prostitution being this willingness, but is there really this willingness even in prostitution?
Um, there is a willingness for some people to engage in prostitution for the simple fact, um, some people like sex. Some people give, well, I do it anyway. Why not get paid for it? Some people give, I like the attention that I get. Um, honestly, it really gives on the person, on who that person is, and their own reasoning on why they engaged in prostitution. Um, I can't speak for a public. I can't speak for a whole. Um, on why, a mass or a multitude have decided to make the decision that they made to go into prostitution. Each individual person, you have to ask them, what's your reasoning into going into prostitution? And sometimes it can be different situations. I know some people gone into prostitution because they have an excessive amount of bills that they need to pay for. Somebody's trying to get a medical procedure, or and the trans community, a girl wanted to get her body done, or she wanted to get bags, or so it's definitely a person's choice when we talk about prostitution. People have their own ideas on why they want to go into prostitution.
Very, thank you very much for illuminating that for us. And yeah, it's important for us to understand the distinction of those terms and to really look at them. So I appreciate the way in which you were able to do that, to make sure that there's understanding. But I think one of the most important elements that you raised for me is having that conversation with the person. That if you are this advocate, if you are this person who is a support, supposed to be of a support nature to the individual, that it's not what's in your head and your thoughts about what that person is going through, but having that conversation and being very direct with them um, to understand why they are positioned as they have been. Anything else that you want to share with us about the distinction in those terms, or also some of the reasons that folks may engage in survival sex? You highlighted some of those. Anything else you want to share?
Um, One of the things, as far as the distinction that I've noticed, um, sometimes it depends on who's saying it, what's the reason that they're saying it, and if they're trying to victimize a person or not. Sometimes a person will say one thing and do another. Sometimes a person will make something seem like what it isn't. And some people just aren't honest with themselves because they can't necessarily take the truth of the situation. And some of the reasons that people engage in survival sex work, like I stated, um, sometimes they have no other option. If I am a high school dropout, I'm homeless, I'm running from, if they allow me, this person's couch to this person's couch. I don't have food, I don't have money, I don't know how I'm going to go about living day to day. What is my options? Like, what are my options? I know that I have nice assets, and I know that it's a possibility that someone might pay for it. I have to do what I have to do to make sure that I can survive. I have to do what I have to do to make sure that whether it's throwing someone $300 or $400 a month just to sleep on their couch, or having $200 to be able to still put food in their house, for being able to feed me while I'm in their home, or having money to get a hotel room so I have somewhere to sleep at the end of the day. Um, Oftentimes people forget to factor in the fact that with survival sex work, a lot of times people are going through so many different things. Some of them are HIV positive. Some of them um, are dealing with mental health issues. Some of them um, are dealing with familial issues where they might not have family. When you mix all of these things together, you literally feel like you have nothing. You have no one. Um, this is your last option. This is the end of the road for me. If this don't work out, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if tomorrow I'm going to wake up or not. Because if I'm out on the streets, then what?
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned those things too, the deep emotional feelings that people are going through. At the same time, society has had a way that we've looked, that we've expressed transphobia, and that we brought with it this whole issue of stigma impose on the person. So they're already feeling as though very low, very unworthy, very humiliated, disenfranchised. They're already feeling that. And at the same time, we have a society that shows this issue of stigma that's been associated with someone's identity and being trans. And that may have this effect and impact their health and safety as well. So, what are some of the ways in which this stigma has continued to impact the health and well-being of men and women who are trans, who are in the sex work and have been put into prostitution or in prostitution or are being trafficked. Why, how has that impacted them?
Um, One of the biggest stereotypes is that all trans women engage in survival sex work. Not all trans women engage in survival sex work. Another stereotype, which is also stigma, is that people engaging in sex work, trans individuals engaging in sex work, are passing along HIV to individuals. And that's not all the time, that's not the case. A lot of times we have instances where if a person is coming to me, as I'm a sex worker, I'm not saying me personally, I'm saying hypothetically, if a person is coming to me as a sex worker, there's no telling who else he's sleeping with. Just because he could be sleeping with his wife, he could be sleeping with Tom, Dick, and Harry down the street, and then he's sleeping with me. Trans women are not always the root of the problem. And that's one of the biggest stereotypes that we face, is that if a man pops up with a disease, oh, a trans woman or a gay man that gave it to him. That is not the case. That is definitely not the case. And unfortunately, that impacts our safety, because the first thing they want to do is, now they want to attack trans women. They want to kill trans women. They want to attack gay men. They want to kill gay men. For the simple fact that this stigma and these stereotypes that you all are continuously placing on us is now making our safety at jeopardy. It affects our mental health, because every time that you say, you don't got nothing, right? Or you swear up and down that I done gave you something, which I know, I'm clean as a whistle. I done been to the doctor, I done got my checkup. I done danced out the doctor's office, because once again, he done gave me all your tests are clean. But now you're badgering me. You're sending me threatening text messages. You're popping up. You're calling me, threatening me, because you caught something from God knows who. You link it to me. It's not me. And now you're trying to attack my mental sanity, because now you are literally and unequivocally threatening my safety. And oftentimes, trans women don't feel safe in most settings that they go to. When we look at everything that's happening in the world right now, Ayam Dior, for what was described as a fender bender, because she was a trans individual, she was attacked by 20-something people. There were 2 trans women in Philly that were just killed over the last 2 days, and one of them's body was found dismembered and thrown in a river. So at the end of the day, our safety is typically always at jeopardy, and casting aspersions because of the stigma of the community and the stereotypes that has been placed on the community puts my life at jeopardy.
Right. And are there also stigmas that come along with making it where the thought that women who and men, trans people who are doing sex work will do anything? And how does this impact your physical safety, your emotional safety, and your ability to just be in that type of space? You mentioned HIV. So while you're clean, and you've done what you need to do, and you're being conscious of all those things. Who are these people that you also may be out there who want your services or want someone's services that's in the work that may not be clean? And
I'll speak from past experiences on this one. As
oh,
a former sex worker,
mhm.
you have people that that try to endanger your health or your safety all the time. There are dates that um, they want to do things raw. Um, they want to do things um, drug usage where it's do you party and play? They ask questions like, do you party and play? Um, and while some people do, some people don't. Um, I was never a girl that did that, but you lose out on clientele if you don't. For the simple fact of if I know, okay, this date is asking, do I party and play? I say no. But this date is saying that he has $1,500 for, a 2-hour session. And all he wants to do is, have sex and, do a couple lines or pop a pill or whatever it is that he does. Now I have to make a conscientious decision on, am I going to engage in this party so that way, and I say party in quotation marks, but am I going to engage in this party and jeopardize myself, or am I going to pay this and lose out? If I lose out, my safety can be in danger because then I might be back on the streets. I might not have anywhere to go. That one date could set me for the week where I could decide not to do anything. I could get a hotel room and I would have somewhere to stay, or I could give money to somebody to stay at their house. But then if I do it, who's to say that it isn't laced? Who's to say that I don't have any adverse effects to it? Once I'm under the influence of it, who's to say that, he won't, do anything to me that I normally would not allow him to do? So it's definitely something um, big um, when it comes down to stigma, because they just assume that we do everything, and that's not always the case. While I know I need money, but I'm not going to jeopardize myself to the point that just because you have this money, at the end of the day, there'll always be another date. That's one thing that I try to tell girls that are currently engaged in sex work. If it is something that you do not do, don't do it. So there will always be another date. At the end of the day, yeah, the money might not be as high as the one before, but there will always be another date. Don't take a substance that you normally don't do. Don't put yourself in a predicament that you could be the next girl that's being shared in our Facebook group. Um ooh, At Baltimore City Haven, we have a lot of the younger generation. And I'm trying to stop myself from getting emotional because
Mhm.
I try to stop them. I try to remove as many obstacles out of their path that I can as possible so they won't have to go down the road that I went.
Mhm.
I lecture them, I sit with them, I talk with them. We hold support groups. Like I really try to get them to understand. I try to, if I can, I try to drag them out of sex work for the simple fact of I've been down that road and it leads to nothing but trauma. It leads to nothing but trauma, and everyone isn't strong enough to handle that trauma. I've seen it eat away at girls because their mental and emotional health has been tried on so many levels where they turn in on themselves. You know, they don't want to be bothered by anyone. They don't communicate. They literally feel like they can't trust anyone, and it gets to a point where you start having very deep thoughts. You know, I had a girl. Um, she calls me auntie. She's 19 years old, and she called me one day because I told her, you know, it doesn't matter what time it is. You know, if you ever feel like you need to talk, then you call me. She called me. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. She said, "Auntie, I want to kill myself." And I said, "What's going on?" I instantly woke. Mind you, I was asleep. I
Wow.
literally woke up like out of the dead of my sleep when she called, and that call really woke me up. You know, those words really woke me up. So like where I was completely present mentally and here, I was on that phone call,
Mm.
um, and she's like, "Auntie, I just did some things that I didn't want to do, but I did it because I need the money." And she said, "I remember that you said that there'll always be another date, but Auntie," she said, "I haven't eaten in 3 days. I've been out on the streets. I didn't know where else to turn." And she engaged in a substance um, that affected her. Um, and I won't say the substance, but it affected her very deeply. And things happened to her that caused her to be afraid for herself and afraid of herself. And I had to coax her from the edge. Um, just based off of the stigma that's placed on us and the stereotypes that's placed on us because the date just assumed that she was going to do anything.
Mhm.
And while she didn't want to, she did it because she needed the money because she was a trans woman of color that hadn't eaten in 3 days, had been out in the streets, and didn't know what her next option was going to be.
And it's almost as if she postponed that decision by going ahead with that date out by herself. Then that decision to not continue her life might have come at that point, and finding going ahead and getting another date to be the option for how do I survive one more day that she was faced for. So it seems as though it's a day-to-day decision, a moment-to-moment decision that um, has to be made in order to look at your safety and how health and well-being is impacted by what it
Every
is.
time,
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, right ahead.
every time that you make that decision to get in that car, or every time you make that decision to allow someone into your hotel room, or every time you make that decision to go out on that stroll, everything impacts your mental health and your safety because you literally have to resign yourself to the fact that this might be my last day.
Wow.
This might be my last moment.
Wow.
It's unfortunate, But mentally, you have to prepare yourself that in the case that I don't survive this, I have to come to the fact that this is what it's going to be.
Wow. You know, Molly, considering that, then, you know, and all that's going on today in our streets, and this
Mm-hmm.
issue of race, class, and gender being very prevalent for us right now, for Black, for the Black community, and particularly diversity, we want to recognize that the Black community is very diverse in race, class, and gender, and sexual orientations and sexual
Mm-hmm.
identity, all of those things, very diverse. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how has your identity, or how does someone's identity, the diversity of their identity, impact their experience with survival sex or sex trafficking?
Um, First off, it depends on what name, what community is going to give it, or I should say, what name people looking at the community members is going to give it. Because if it's a Black trans woman, she's a sex worker or she's a hoe. If it's a white woman, oh, she's an escort, you know? Oftentimes, um, when you're Black, you get the shorter end of the stick. But when you're Black and you're a trans woman of color, there isn't even a stick.
Mm, wow.
Um, One thing I've always said is trans women get treated like they're second-class citizens. And the reason why I say this is because, first off, we shouldn't have to fight for rights that are owed to us like they're owed to everyone else. But we're out here doing it.
Mm-hmm.
When you go about thinking of race, gender, and class, and sex work, you will never really find women on the same strolls that you'll find trans women. You won't find white girls on the same strolls that you'll find like the Black girls. Most white girls, oh, they're engaging in sex work. Oh, you know, they're in a house or they're in a hotel room. They're in some type of skimpy little outfit or some type of fantasy effect, you know, to sell an illusion, while a Black trans woman is out in whatever she thinks is the shortest or the tightest or whatever it is that can showcase her body that will make you want to stop to pick her up.
Mm.
Race. So I'm from DC. While I live in Baltimore now, living in DC, we had strolls. And for anyone that is watching that is from DC or lives in DC currently, back in the day, the strolls, and some of them were still active. You had K Street, you had West Virginia Avenue, you had K Street, West Virginia Avenue, Eastern Avenue, Spring Grove. I feel like there's one more. It's like two more I'm forgetting. But like K Street was like four strolls in one. K Street, you had Third and K, where you had the real pretty girls. That's where you had like real exotic looking black girls and like real exotic like Latina girls. The ones that actually hung out with the black girls. Fourth and K was where you had the real body girls. Like these are the ones that they went and they got, you know, the silicone injections and they got the small hip, the small waist, the big hips, you know. They already had their bags and stuff done. Fifth and K and Sixth and K were, I can't remember what those stores were. And then Spring Road was like the Latina stroll where you had a lot of the Latinos and the Latinas. Eastern Avenue was another black stroll, but you know, that was what we would call death row. Because you had to be a thorough girl. Like you had to be a girl that wasn't afraid to fight. You know, that wasn't afraid to, you know, come out the house and do what you had to do if need be, because that was the roughest stroll. You would never see white girls out with the girls. When you heard of their sex work, you heard them in hotels or, you know, they were posted. A few years ago, Backpage was a very prevalent site. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but Backpage was a very prevalent site that a lot of people did their escorting off of. And it kept girls off of the streets. Once Backpage got censored, it caused girls to go back out onto the streets, which once again raised the violence. But, you know, there was always a separation. Like, well, the black girls and Latina girls had Backpage. The white girls had certain sites. Lord knows I'm not trying to spill all these sites out on this webinar, because this is how the girls still make their money. But race plays a part in it, but not to the actual sex work, but more so to the way that it's received. And what I mean by when I say that, if a white woman or a white trans woman is a sex worker, she's not harassed, she's not criticized. It just is what it is. But when a black woman or a black trans woman is a sex worker, they're degraded. You know, they're made to seem like they're unfit people. They pretty much get everything thrown at them but the kitchen sink, unfortunately.
I see. And what about the economy part of this, as far as the value that perhaps a black sex worker may be perceived in having as opposed to a white sex worker? Is there any difference in that that's seen?
I hate to say this, but almost to a certain extent, white sex workers are respected, while black sex workers tend to be disrespected more often. They are victimized. They are engaged on the daily by police. Um, it almost feels like if you're a black sex worker, you have a target on your back. I have girls that have been forced into doing sexual acts with police officers just so that the police officers wouldn't take them to jail because that's what they would threaten them with. So it definitely plays a part. And someone just asked a question. But it definitely plays a part.
And are white sex workers making more money on the streets or seem to be, you know,
Uh,
worthy of a greater paycheck?
I don't think that they're making more money on the streets.
Oh, right.
Now, off of the sites, possibly, because they have more access to the different sites. But I definitely think street-based sex work is still more so predominantly Black or Latino.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next question.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that for us. And so, as we look at those things too, how crucial is identity affirmation when working with survivors? So, we as service providers, as advocates, being that support system in our community, how important is it that we identify and also affirm an individual's identity or the multiple intersectionalities of their identity?
I'm gonna say it the best way that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call me no he. My PGPs are she, her, goddess, queen, sister. Or you can call me Molly. But you will not disrespect what I'm risking my life for every day. You're not going to disrespect the fact that I'm living in my truth. When you do that, and some people do it and they don't realize they do it. Some people do it just to be funny. Some people do it to be hurtful. But when you do that, you reawaken a trauma. People suffer from gender dysphoria. A lot of people. Some people will take their lives behind it. You will not make me feel less than what I am. I will never allow you to do that. And unfortunately, that happens in a lot of spaces where people aren't taught to be culturally competent when dealing with the community. And when they're not taught to be culturally competent on dealing with the community, issues happen. Issues, you know, is given, you get a phone call. Well, she was just right here. She was just right here yesterday. But you hear that, oh, the person just killed themselves and things like that. But you don't know it's because one of your workers just sat up here and misgendered this person repeatedly because you're not teaching cultural competency to your staff. And too often, that seems to be the case in a lot of places. It's getting better, but don't sit. If you know your staff isn't culturally competent, if you know that your staff isn't going to do the work, like, don't put a trans individual in a room with someone that's not going to respect their identity. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what trauma, what stress that might bring to them, what feelings it might make them feel, whether they internalize it or whether they explode.
Wow.
You don't know that trauma. You don't know what it makes them feel. And then it makes a person not want to be around you. It makes them not want to access the services that you're trying to give them. They don't want to engage with you.
Mhm.
Why would I want to engage with you when you can't even respect the smallest detail of affirming me by affirming my identity?
And that truly places the onus within organizations that we have to check ourselves. Why are we checking someone else? We need to get our own houses in order, which really leads to that next question because we, want to recognize the issues around systemic and institutional violence that's in our community and the ways in which sex work and survival sex and or sex trafficking interface with this whole issue of institutional and systemic violence. But even beyond that, I want to throw in there and say racism and violence, institutional violence and institutional racism, and how that has played a role in what's happening in our community. And earlier, you began to talk a little bit about the police department. And the police department is just one system when there are many systems. So, how do you see this issue of racism and violence institutional as, as it's imposed with institutional racism and also violence impacting one's ability to do sex work or survival sex or when one is trafficking?
You have the police, you have the EMTs, you have sometimes the security forces. Um, there are so many inner workings to systemic and institutional violence when it comes to um, sex work, survival sex work and trafficking, especially within my community, for the simple fact that, sometimes we have to go into areas that we normally wouldn't. And the first thing is, oh, the neighborhood association doesn't want you there. You look bad. The people are coming out of their houses and, oh, it's condoms littered everywhere up and down the street. Strange cars, noises being made in the middle of the night. But what they're not realizing is I'm doing what I have to do to survive. Um, you place these binds on me because you don't want to pour into me. You don't want to invest in me. You don't want to allow me to get a job. You don't want to allow me to get an education. You don't want to allow me to actually become something. So you make me go out and you make me do things that I don't want to do, that traumatizes me every day, that I have to do it. But yet then you try to um, place obstacles in my path when I'm doing what you forced me to do.
Mm.
You forced me to do this by not pouring into me. You forced me to do this by not saying, you know what? I get it. I understand. It's okay. You might have a couple of charges on your sheet, but look at what these charges are. Look at why they are.
Mhm.
Why do you think if I'm coming to you, I'm asking you for help, give me a chance. Give me a chance to show you that I want to do the work that I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to better myself. I'm trying to get to a point where I can be self-sufficient without traumatizing myself by having to give away my body, by having to give away my spirit every time I'm doing this. Um, you know, oftentimes we have people that like the police. Um, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question. But oftentimes we have organizations like the police. Who else? Um, I'm trying to think of other agencies because it's so many. Um, when you think of institutional and systemic violence that really play a part in integrating or well interacting, excuse me, with sex workers, the police, neighborhood watches, like I said before, neighborhood associations,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hotel management,
Mm-hmm.
um, condo associations, any type of system or institution that is going to degrade me for what I'm doing and try to stop me from surviving is a system or institution that is projecting violence to me. Because if I have no other option, if this is my last resort, what am I supposed to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, and placing you at a point that just to survive every day, you have to deal with all of the ways in which those institutions, systems interact with your life, and the stigma and violence and bias, the stigma and bias that's within those institutions that then continue to be seen in impacting the way you can live your life. And I just want to be very conscious of saying that when we talk about institutions and you're naming the police, I want to uplift what you said earlier in talking about systems of that are engaged in providing um, social services, so that we too are a system and have caused that same kind of harm to our trans Black women and men in providing.
Um, yes, I got a question from Ayana. Someone in the audience had asked, what are your recommendations or feelings about sex workers who are also raising children, maybe homeless and living in motels? Do what you have to do to take care of you and your children. At the end of the day, I would never stop a mother or a father from doing what they have to do to take care of their kids. But I would also offer look into finding resources for yourself and your children. There are a lot of resources out here that are geared towards families. Um, Depending upon what state you're in or what city you're in, there is a good amount of resources per area that they have money, they have funding, they have programs to get you into housing, to get your children into daycare or school, to put food in your home, in your stomachs. Don't don't be afraid to utilize the system if you're able to.
Mhm. Right, right. As it is available, putting the onus of systems being out there to provide the support in a culturally competent way so that people will feel like they can utilize the resources that are there to support them. Absolutely. And then our next question speaks to how does sex work's stigma and bias reinforce community and interpersonal violence against Black cis and Black trans women? So it's ongoing in both of these communities where we see the violence. And I think you spoke to that a little bit earlier in our conversation, but is there anything else you want to add about stigma and bias as we see it in sex work?
Um, Oftentimes, no matter where you go, you will always see that Black women, whether trans or cis, will be the first ones that they decide to go after. And it's sad to say this, but once again, a white woman or a white man can be engaging, can be doing the same things that you do, but because of the color of your skin and because of the antagonistic nature of most of these systems and most of these institutions, you will be the first one to be roughed up. You'll be the first one to get arrested. You will be the first one to be hassled. Why are you out here? What are you doing? If I come back around here and I see you out here with somebody again, I'm locking you up. All these things. You, because of the color of your skin, unfortunately, is going to be the reason why you're met with that as opposed to our lighter skinned counterparts.
Right.
And it's sad to say that.
Mhm. And how does this show up in the Black community specifically, too? You know, that as we say that, I think we need to look at our own community's belief, as you said, starting in the home, but then spreading to our community, not being in someone else's community and doing your work, but in overall our community, on our block, our families, and interpersonal violence with relationships with interpersonal relationships that you may have within your family, and how does violence even play out in that area?
Um, oh yeah, you can't talk to her no more. She out there, she doing that stuff for them folk out there. No, you can't talk to her anymore. Um, Somebody need to go get her kids. And taking her mom in them house, cause you all know she about to be out there on the streets, and her children don't need to be around that. You know, sometimes people in your community turn their backs on you because you engage in sex work. And unfortunately, you know, they almost make it seem like you're incapable of still being a person's friend because they engage in sex work. But what you're not realizing is the sex work is what's providing for you, especially in a family. You want to ostracize me from the family, but the sex work that I just engaged in, is what put the food on this table. The sex work that I just engaged in is what made sure these lights stayed on. The sex work that I engaged in made sure that we weren't put out another month. We still able to turn the key in the lock. But you want to ridicule me, or you want to make me feel less than because I had to do what I had to do, but yet you all aren't trying to help me. You all aren't pouring into me. You're ridiculing me. You're trying to tear me down. You're questioning, and you're questioning my choices. You're trying to make me feel less than by ostracizing me because I'm doing what I have to do. But yet, you don't want to interact with me. You don't want to say, you know what? No, you don't have to go out there and do that. I know you need help. I'm gonna help you, my sister. I'm gonna help you, daughter. I'm gonna help you, my brother. Like, sometimes people in your own community can be the biggest hypocrites.
And there are real lessons to learn from that. How do we care for our own community in the same time that we're asking outsiders to care for our community? So there's
Mm.
definitely lessons to be learned there. And, you know, and looking at this whole issue in the different ways in which violence and is experienced for trans and cis women who are doing sex work, but and we have talked about how police and policing has been a large part of what sex workers have to experience, and how they're taken off the streets and arrested. But also the violence that sex workers are receiving while they're trying to do their work or live their lives, because they don't even have to be working to be exposed to this violence. But yet some sex workers do not see that law enforcement or the legal system is is a way for to have an intervention when they are suffering pain and illegal acts that are happening. So what are some of the reasons that someone who has experienced this violence would not
Mm.
choose not to engage in what's supposed to be the legal system to help them to end the violence that they're experiencing in their lives?
Because they don't trust the people. Why would I trust you to help me when I was just on the stroll 2 nights ago and you arrested me? Why would I trust you when every time I'm outside, you're hassling me? Like, why would I feel comfortable with trying to allow myself to be placed in a situation by going to talk to you when all you're going to do is look down on me? Because you know that 2 days ago, you just saw me outside on the stroll. Why would I do that to myself? Why would I allow myself to sit up here and think that y'all are really going to care about my issues?
Right.
I had a question, I think, from one of the participants, from Ayana. She had said, or I saw Ayana. One thing, I'm actually glad you reminded me of that, Ayana. One thing that happens alongside sex work and survival sex work, especially in relationships, is domestic violence. All too often, sex workers are met with, especially when they're in relationships, are met with domestic violence for the simple fact that people, significant others, can't handle the fact of what their counterpart is doing. But I'm providing for the family, but now I have to come in and I have to take, your fists, your kicks, your hits, because you feel insecure or you feel some type of way because you're not providing for the family. I am. Unfortunately, the means that I have to do it are not means that are favorable to either one of us. But I am the one that is trying to make sure that we can stay together. I'm the one that's trying to make sure that, we all have a roof over our head. But then also you have domestic violence where we have sex workers that are being assaulted by their dates and things like that. And the reason why I would qualify under domestic violence is the simple fact a lot of times, especially like even back when, once again, reverting back to my own experience, because the best experience to speak on is your own.
Yes.
When I was engaging in survival sex work, I got to the point where I had regulars. And these regulars were people that I don't want to say that I would trust. I don't want to say that I would necessarily trust them, but I had a sort of familiarity with them
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I saw them often enough that if people outside looking in, they might say, "Oh, it was just a lover's quarrel. It was a lover's spat," and that's what we document it as, instead of, "No, this man just assaulted me.
Right.
He paid for a service." But see, then you don't want to say, "Oh, well, he paid for a service," because then now they want to lock you up on solicitation.
Right.
Uh, he's probably gonna get off scot-free because you just admitted to the people that you've been prostituting, you engaged in sex work, and now they want to lock you up on solicitation charges. Forget that this man just knocked me 35 ways from Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But because you heard, "Oh, I was engaged in solicitation," now you want to, you want to chain me down. And unfortunately, that's how it works a lot of times in these situations where the victim becomes the person that's blamed for the situation that's going on. Just because
Molly,
something has happened.
yes, I'm just going to interrupt you for a moment, only because I know we only have 4 minutes left.
Oh,
And I know we're engaged in this wonderful conversation, and I just feel like we need another half hour, but maybe we'll have to bring you back for that too. But I do want to ask that you share with us some ways. What are some ways in which organizations can provide culturally specific services? What would it look like for Black and trans sex workers and survivors of sex trafficking? You could share some.
Um, provide cultural competency training for these organizations. Um, provide like job readiness programs. Start educational programs. Um, the best way that we can defeat oppression is by doing what we need to do that they won't allow us to do. They don't want to let us educate ourselves. We do it anyway. I will. Um, at Baltimore Safe Haven, we have like our transitional housing program, like the girls in our program right now. All three of them right now are former sex workers. They're in-house right now. We just had one that graduated out of the program into her own home. She's starting a CNA program. We have two young ladies that were former sex workers that didn't have their high school diplomas that are now getting ready to start GED classes with the Baltimore City Community College. And one young lady just got a job working for Amazon. None of them any longer engage in survival sex work. At Baltimore Safe Haven, we believe in taking the girls in and helping them grow. We want to allow them to see that, yes, we know that you have trauma. Yes, we know that, you've been hurt, but we're here to help you heal, sis. We're here for you. Whatever you need, we're going to make sure that you get it. The other people in the past, the organizations, the programs that you went to before, they might not have done it. They might have fed you a bunch of BS, but we're here. We're doing the work. We're going to make sure that we do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And I really have to pay a lot of honor and respect to your organization, because the other thing is that I've noticed is that they have people providing the services who have the real lived experience of being in that situation. So the messages that you're able to bring and give to everyone are from that past experience, from your life. And so you can relate they can develop that trust in you. And instead of depending on that person who had, as you said before at the beginning of our conversation, a very limited option for what they could convey to help to support you and others, then you have a broader perspective of what's available and what could be. You can help them envision what could be in their lives instead of just what has been in the past. So Molly, I really respect and love you for taking the time to share with us all of the information that you have and to provide the forethought. If we have other questions, could you please continue to list questions in the chat, and we will make sure and send out the response as we have everyone's email address. We can send out our response. This information is live, it is being recorded. And so if you know of people who were not able to participate, we will be able to disseminate. Thank you so much, Molly, on behalf of UGMA, the National Center on Violence Against Violence in the Black, against women in the Black community. I'm sorry about that. Getting tongue-tied, I need my water too. On behalf of UGMA, we'd like to thank everyone for participating with us and joining. We wish you safety and health and well-being. Good day.